Welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I am Diane. I'm one of the organizers here at the Center for Biological Diversity. For those of you who don't know, here at the center we work to protect endangered species and wild places. Our organizing team helps build grassroots campaigns to protect them by providing information, education, and support to citizens, folks like you, who also want to protect imperiled lands and species that are at risk. So many of you have participated in other training webinars we've held to join the fight to protect wolves nationwide. And many of you have also joined Slack, our online platform for getting wolf activists connected across the country and for information sharing. So many familiar faces tonight. I'm really glad to see all of you. Earlier this year, our Call of the Wild campaign focused on protecting wolves at the federal level, but we also want to help build wolf activists into effective regional and state level change makers. So tonight, our webinar focuses on wolves in Washington state, where there has been relentless agency killing of wolves on behalf of the livestock industry, and where there is currently a pending public comment period for a new wolf plan that the state agency will be developing. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has held 3 online webinars in the last month to present information about the planning process, but those webinars gave a very limited background on what's going on with wolf management in Washington. The comment period ends on November 1st, as many of you probably know, and we want you to be able to submit meaningful comments to the agency on the proposed new wolf plan, which means you need more in-depth information. So tonight is our counter webinar, as we're calling it, and we'll be taking a much deeper dive into Washington wolf issues. After that, we'll let you know how to submit your comments to the department, and we'll also highlight key wolf issues that you should address in your comment letters. So this call should last about an hour. Okay, so let's get started by introducing our 2 co-hosts, and then I'll remind you of some quick tech details, and then we will dive in. So tonight, your hosts are Amaroq Weiss and Sophia Ressler. Amaroq, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everyone. Glad to see so many of you back online again. My name is Amaroq Weiss. I'm the Center's Senior West Coast Wolf Advocate. I am a biologist and former attorney. I've been working in wolf advocacy for the last 22 years at both the state and federal level, and I'm based in the North San Francisco Bay Area. I monitor agency actions regarding wolves in Washington, Oregon, and California. I work with our attorneys on litigation to protect wolves, and I'm working on our federal campaign to stop wolves from being federally delisted. And so here's Sophia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sophia Ressler. I'm the Center's Washington Wildlife Advocate and staff attorney. I'm based in our Seattle office, and I cover a wide range of wildlife protection issues in Washington, from bears to cougars to wolves to orcas. I am working closely with Amaroq and our other attorneys on our Washington wolf litigation, and I work with other conservation groups to fight off bad wolf bills in the state legislature. I'm going to turn it back over to Diane so that she can briefly go over some tech details with you.
Thanks, Sophia. Okay, so really quick, there is a chat box that you can access at the bottom of your screen. I see Catherine's been in there. If folks want to type in there where you're calling from or just say hi, comment and chat with each other, that's a good place to do that. You will also see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So you'll want to use this to ask any questions that come up for you, because questions in the chat box can get lost if folks are sending a lot of messages in there. But we do ask that you hold on to questions until the end of the call, because we're going to cover a lot. So there's a good chance that things that you have questions on will be covered throughout the course of the call. And also, if you called in and you're not using the Zoom app, you won't see these features, but no worries. You can always reach out to us after the call if you have any questions that don't get answered. All right, so with that, I will send it back over to Amaroq and to start off the evening's discussion.
So we know that there's a huge range of activists that are on this webinar, and some of you are brand new to the wolf world, and some of you are what we might consider veterans. We're going to be covering information that some of you may already know about Washington and wolves and other topics which may be new for you. But even if we're covering some topics that you already know about, we hope to be providing you some new facts and some nuances that maybe you didn't know previously. So in tonight's webinar, we're going to discuss the return of wolves to Washington, the current state wolf conservation and management plan, agency wolf killing in Washington for the livestock industry, what does the current science say on managing livestock wolf conflicts, the Wolf Advisory Group and the Wolf-Livestock Interaction Protocol that the agency uses to decide when to kill wolves, lawsuits that are pending against the state for its wolf killing, agency proposals to develop a post-state-delisting wolf plan, and then how to submit your comments on that plan and what are the key issues that you're going to want to comment on. So Sophia's going to start us off with our first subject, which is the return of wolves to Washington.
Like nearly everywhere else in the lower 48 United States, wolves once ranged widely across Washington, with estimates of population levels historically between 2,300 to 5,000 wolves. And just like elsewhere in America, European American settlers who were ranchers and farmers, plus government-sponsored wolf eradication campaigns on behalf of the livestock industry, eliminated wolves from the state by the 1930s. Though occasional wolf sightings occurred in the ensuing decades, it was not until 2008 that Washington had its first confirmed wolf pack with a breeding pair. The reintroduction of wolves to central Idaho and Yellowstone National Park in 1995 and 96 meant that those populations grew, with some of Idaho's wolves then dispersing west into Washington. Wolves from British Columbia also began to make their way south across the border. This is how wolves are returning to the state, through natural dispersal into the state from Idaho and British Columbia. Each year since 2008, Washington's wolf population has grown. In some years quite a bit, in other years only moderately, and in some years by very little. Each year, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife conducts surveys of the state's wolf population. Those surveys are done generally in December, when snow on the ground makes it easier to track and count wolves, and at a time of year when the population has stabilized. The department then issues its annual report a few months later, usually in April of the following year. The 2018 annual report, released in April of 2019, indicated that as of the end of 2018, Washington had at least 126 wolves in 27 packs, of which 15 had successful breeding pairs. A pack is defined as 2 or more wolves traveling together in winter, and a breeding pair is defined as at least 1 adult male and 1 adult female wolf that raised at least 2 pups that survived until December 31st. Not every pack has a successful breeding pair, so there will always be more packs than there are successful breeding pairs. Regarding the annual population growth, the department likes to say that Washington's annual wolf population growth averages 28%. But that statement is misleading, as it doesn't reveal the extreme fluctuations observed. Scientists indicate that when a wolf population is in the early stage of recovery, you will see large increases in annual population for several years, and then it begins to plateau. Not plummet, just plateau. And while in Washington, there was a high rate of annual growth in early years, in other years, the growth is so minimal, it is cause for concern and raises questions about potential links between population growth and wolf killing. This next slide shows that the wolf population each year and the percentage increase each year since 2008, when the first pack and breeding pair were confirmed, to the present. From 2008 to 2018, the confirmed population has grown from 5 wolves to 126. In the early years of 2008 to 2012, growth rates were 180, 36, 84, and 46%. From 2014 to 2016, growth rates were 31, 32, and 28%. But there have also been 3 years in which annual growth rate was almost zero. Only 2% growth in 2013, then 6% in 2017, and 3% in 2018. These numbers are particularly interesting because each of those 3 years of negligible population growth followed a year in which the department killed a significant number of wolves. Some scientific studies have indicated an association between agency killing of wolves with a higher inclination by members of the public to illegally kill wolves and with increases in wolf poaching. Those 2 years in a row of very minimal population growth could potentially be connected to Idaho killing lots of wolves in its state-sanctioned wolf hunting and trapping seasons and making it so that there are fewer wolves in Idaho to disperse into Washington. This is just a possibility, but it is worth noting. Moving on, Amaroq is going to cover our next topic, which is Washington's current wolf conservation and management plan.
You're on mute, Amaroq.
I'm just so polite and make sure I'm on mute when someone else is talking. So Washington has a wolf conservation and management plan. It was written by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then it was adopted by the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission, which is a decision-making body that oversees the department. The plan was adopted in late 2011 after a 4-year process under the State Environmental Policy Act, known as SEPA for short. As part of that SEPA process, the department convened a citizen stakeholder group to give input on what should be in the wolf plan. The department also held multiple public meetings throughout the state to do scoping, much like they're doing now, to get public input on the plan. They then created a draft environmental impact statement, which proposed several alternatives for a wolf plan. They identified the department's preferred alternative of those, and then they obtained scientific peer review of the draft from expert scientists and had more public review and more comments, and then more changes made by the department and the commission, with the final version of the plan being adopted by the commission in December of 2011. At the time that the plan was written, wolves were state listed throughout Washington as state endangered, and they're still listed throughout the state as state endangered. At that time, wolves also were federally listed as endangered throughout all of Washington, but in the spring of 2011, federal protections for wolves were removed in the eastern 1/3 of Washington. Wolves still have federal protections in the western 2/3 of the state. The state wolf plan divides the state into 3 recovery zones, and it set statewide recovery goals. And those 3 recovery zones are called the Eastern Washington Zone, the Northern Cascades Zone, and the Southern Cascades and Northwest Coast Zone. Now, earlier I mentioned that the 2018 annual report said that Washington has 27 packs. However, the State Wildlife Agency killed one entire pack, the OPT pack, this year. So that pack no longer exists. That 2018 report noted that 19 packs were in the northeastern part of Washington, 3 were in southeastern Washington, and 5 were in the North Cascades. There are currently no known packs in that 3rd remaining recovery zone, the Southern Cascades and Northwest Coast. Under the wolf plan, there's 2 ways that wolves can reach recovery goals and be considered for statewide delisting. The first way requires that there be 15 successful breeding pairs for 3 consecutive years. There must be 4 successful breeding pairs in each of those 3 recovery zones, and then another 3 successful breeding pairs anywhere in the state. The second way that wolves could reach recovery goals and be considered for delisting is if there are 18 successful breeding pairs for 1 year. And in that case, each recovery zone must have 4 successful breeding pairs plus 6 additional successful breeding pairs anywhere in the state. And keep in mind that reaching those goals doesn't mean automatic state delisting for wolves. The department has to first make a recommendation for delisting to the commission. The commission would then have to hold public hearings with an opportunity for public comment, and then the commission would make its decision. I think we know how the commission would vote delisting no matter what, but we're not at that fight yet. We're going to talk more about the commission in a little bit. So what else is in the state wolf plan besides a map that divides the state into regions and specified recovery goals? Well, everything you see here on the screen, and I'll list them off for those of you that are calling in and can't see the screen. The plan also includes chapters on wolf conservation, wolf-livestock conflicts, interactions by wolves with wild ungulates such as deer, elk, and moose, wolf interactions with other species, wolf interactions with humans, land management, information and education, research, costs and funding for the wolf plan, and goals, objectives, and strategies, and even more. Washington was not required by the federal government to develop a state wolf plan since Washington was never officially part of a wolf recovery, federal recovery area. And the same is true for Oregon and Washington, or California, but all three West Coast states decided on their own to develop their own state wolf plans, either because wolves were already listed as state endangered in their states, or simply because they realized that wolves would be returning and therefore developing a state plan would be the prudent thing to do. So what's good about the wolf plan? What's not so good about the wolf plan? Well, on the plus side, Washington's 2011 plan was a relatively very good plan compared to many of the other plans across the country, one of the best plans in the country. And that's because it was so scientifically robust. At the time, it was very up to date on what known science there was about many issues related to wolves. But it was also a good plan because it was developed by the department's staff who worked in the endangered species section of the department's wildlife diversity division. And they understand what it means to try to recover an endangered species. Now, on the minus side, the plan science badly needs updating. There's been a substantial amount of science that's been published since 2011 on things like the effectiveness of using lethal versus non-lethal measures to resolve wolf-livestock conflicts. Also on things like social tolerance for wolves, wolves' ecological role, ethical considerations regarding the management of predators in general. Another minus for this plan is its recovery goals are way too low. Of the 4 peer reviewers who reviewed this plan scientifically back when it was being adopted, 3 of them absolutely said unconditionally that the recovery goals are way too low and that their goals were clearly not set using science. They were set using a social consensus, middle of the road agreement type of process, which is not how recovery goals should be set for any species. And then the third reason that the plan's got some downsides to it is that right after the plan was adopted by the commission, wolf management and implementation of the plan was actually taken away from the department's endangered species staff and handed over to their game management division. And as a result, many of the problems that we've been seeing with how wolves are being managed is because wolves are being managed by game managers. These are folks who are looking forward to a future in which wolves could be hunted as game mammals. And we think that wolf management would be playing out very differently in the state if the endangered species staff had been allowed to retain implementation of the plan and management of wolves. So let's move on to our next topic, which is the ongoing slaughter of wolves by the State Wildlife Agency on behalf of the livestock industry. And Sophia is going to cover this subject.
Since wolves have been returning to Washington, conflicts between livestock and wolves and how those conflicts are being managed has dominated the narrative in Washington, and rightfully so, because the department's response has been abysmal. From 2012 to the present, the department has killed 31 state endangered wolves. Of those, 26 have been killed for the same livestock operation, which continuously refuses to adequately oversee and protect its livestock. And of all the wolves killed, 90% have been killed on public lands for conflicts with livestock which have occurred almost entirely on public lands. Here's the breakdown of the department's wolf kill operations to date. All the instances with an asterisk on the slide are wolves killed for that one same livestock operation. And I'm going to just read these for people on the phone. So in 2012, 7 of the 8 members of the wedge pack were killed and the pack was destroyed. And that was for the same livestock producer. In 2014, the breeding female of the huckleberry pack was killed. In 2016, 7 of the 11 members of the Profanity Peak pack were killed. The only remaining members were a sub-adult female and 3 pups who likely starved to death. The pack was destroyed for the same livestock producer. In 2017, 1 of 2 members of the Sherman pack was killed and the pack was destroyed for that same livestock producer. Also in 2017, 2 smack out pack members were killed. In 2018, 2 of the 4 members of the OPT pack were killed for that same livestock producer. Also in 2018, the breeding male of the Togo pack was killed, and 1 smack out pack member was killed for the same livestock producer. In 2019, the entire 8-member OPT pack was killed off, once again for the same livestock producer. And finally, the breeding female of the Grouse Flats pack was killed. In a little bit, I'm going to discuss more details about some of the department's decision to kill these wolves. Bearing in mind this history of agency wolf killing, we now come to the topic of what the science has to say about managing livestock wolf conflicts. The emerging science is concluding that killing wolves is the wrong approach to deterring conflicts. First, there are no studies that have been conducted according to gold standards of science that test whether killing wolves prevents conflicts. 2 studies simply analyze data retrospectively regarding wolves killed for livestock conflicts over about a 20-year period in the Northern Rockies wolf recovery area. One of these studies did not take into account the effect wolf population growth over time could have on the number of conflicts. Neither study looked at whether any non-lethal measures had been used on any of these ranches, and neither study looked at whether killing wolves on one ranch caused the rest of the wolves to move to the neighboring ranch and have conflicts there. A later study found that this can happen. One of the studies found that if wolves are killed within 7 days of livestock conflict, there's very little difference than if no wolves are killed at all. And if the wolf killing takes place 14 or more days after the conflict, there is no difference than not killing any wolves at all. Studies which concluded that killing entire wolf packs stopped conflicts either failed to mention or specifically note that once the terrain is filled with a new pack in subsequent years, the conflicts begin again. This means killing entire packs is only a very short-term solution. Studies which compared effectiveness of non-lethal methods versus killing wolves to stop conflicts have found that non-lethal methods are more effective and more cost-efficient over the long run. A recent paper analyzed the results of 140 studies worldwide. That review concluded that the only methods which have been shown scientifically to deter conflicts are non-lethal methods, specifically the use of fencing, guard dogs, and fladry. And fladry is the red flagging that gets hung on fence lines. Another area of scientific inquiry is social tolerance, asking the question, does killing wolves increase people's social tolerance for coexisting with wolves? Agencies generally claim they must kill wolves or allow livestock owners to kill wolves or must allow hunting and trapping seasons on wolves to improve social tolerance for wolves. But when scientists tested this hypothesis, they have found the results were just the opposite. Social tolerance went down. Finally, some scientists have studied the effects on wolf packs when members of their pack are killed. If the pack's breeding animals are killed, there is a greatly increased chance the pack will split or dissolve entirely, and pack reproduction and pup survival can be reduced. When not killed by humans, wolf packs evolve into large, multi-generational family units with different skills and roles played by each, which helps the wolf family thrive. Increased livestock conflicts can arise when older animals are killed, perhaps because the pack now lacks its most experienced hunter of wild ungulates. So the remaining pack members turn to livestock which are easier to prey and to hunt, Let's talk about the steps the agency has taken, which have driven how wolves are being managed in Washington. I'm going to turn it back over to Amaroq for this subject.
I just answered a question. Somebody asked for the paper that reviewed the 140 studies, so I just posted that in the chat in response to your question, Aaron Haug. Okay. The 2011 Wolf Plan indicates that after its adoption, that the department was going to convene a wolf advisory group, or WAG for short, and that was going to be able to help advise the department in implementing the state wolf plan. But the WAG wasn't actually established immediately. Instead, it was formed about 1.5 years later in early 2013, and that was in response to the public outrage that arose after the department slaughtered the wedge pack in late 2012. The department crafted a flow chart in 2014 that it used to decide whether to kill wolves for livestock conflicts, and later that same year in 2014, the department killed the breeding female of the Huckleberry pack, despite promising it would avoid killing the breeding male or breeding female. Now, since that time, the agency's wolf killing has instead taken place pursuant to a wolf-livestock interaction protocol that was developed by the department with the advice of the WAG. That protocol was first developed in 2016. Later that same year, the protocol was used to justify the department destroying the Profanity Peak pack. The protocol was revised by the WAG and the department in 2017, and under this version, in 2017, 2018, and 2019, the department has wiped out the Sherman pack and the OPT pack and killed members of the Togo, Smackout, and Grouse Flats packs. The protocol establishes when wolves can be killed by the agency for conflicts with livestock, and it sets forth expectations of steps that livestock owners can take to proactively deter conflicts with non-lethal measures. The key parts of the protocol state that the department can kill wolves if there have been 4 livestock predation events in 10 months or 3 livestock predation events in 30 days, and that livestock owners are expected to implement at least 2 non-lethal proactive conflict deterrence measures and then reactive measures once a predation has occurred. It is extremely problematic that the department has devised this protocol based on consensus agreements by a small group of people, most of whom don't have wolf expertise, instead of basing it on what the science says, what the law requires, with full public input and scientific peer review, and which ultimately is a protocol with no enforceable requirements, only expectations. Since the department established the WAG and contracted an outside facilitator to get the WAG to come to consensus agreements, the department has now killed nearly 4 times as many wolves as before the WAG was established and before the facilitator was hired. The state has also spent nearly $2 million of taxpayer money to pay the facilitator, hold the WAG meetings, and kill the wolves. It's also clear that the department isn't even abiding by the terms of the protocol, is killing wolves even when expectations have not been met, and has on multiple occasions misled the public. We know this because of evidence obtained from Public Records Act requests, from the department's own documents, from the department's own public wolf updates, and from admissions made in court by the department's attorneys. There are numerous examples we could give you. I'm going to describe just 4 of them. Example 1. When the department destroyed the Profanity Peak pack in 2016, it told the public that once it was known that there was a salt block for cattle near the pack's den and rendezvous site, and therefore drawing cattle to these high wolf use areas, the salt block was removed. But in fact, the salt block was not moved until 5 weeks after this was discovered, which was 3 weeks after wolves had already started killing cattle and 4 days after the department had already started trapping wolves to kill them. And the only reason the department had the salt block moved then was they were afraid that cattle would become caught in the traps that were set for wolves. Example 2. When the department destroyed the Sherman pack in 2017, it told the public it had killed 1 wolf of the pack in order to try to change pack behavior. But it had misled the public to think that there were 5 Sherman wolves at the time of the killing. As the department knew, however, at the time the kill order was issued, the Sherman pack consisted of only 2 wolves, and by killing 1, they destroyed the pack. Example 3. When the department killed the breeding male and a pup of the the breeding female and a pup of the OPT pack in late 2018, it claimed that the livestock owner had taken several actions to protect its livestock. First, the department said that he had been removing sick and injured livestock so as not to attract wolves. Yet freshly wounded calves were found with older healing injuries that were up to a week old or more, making it clear that injured animals were not being removed. Next, the department said that the rancher had moved his livestock away from the wolves' rendezvous site, but admitted in court there were still 40 cattle milling around right on the rendezvous site. Additionally, the department said that range riders had been used to monitor and safeguard the cattle, but none of the range riders were in the area of the cattle and conflicts until after the department required the range riders to start wearing GPS units so that the range riders' locations could be monitored. Example 4. When the department recently killed the remaining 8 OPT pack members, they claimed that range riders had been working the area, yet notes obtained from internal department meetings show they weren't, and the department knew it. As these examples demonstrate, major problems with the protocol and how the department implements are its lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and lack of enforceability. So as a result of these protocols and the kill orders, there have been lawsuits filed against the state for its wolf killing management actions. And this is our next topic. We have sued the State Wildlife Agency over the protocol and the kill orders based on the protocol for violating the State Environmental Policy Act, known as SEPA, and for violating the State Administrative Procedures Act, or APA. And several private citizens have also filed a similar lawsuit. Now, down to its basics, SEPA requires the state agency to conduct a full scientific analysis of actions they may do, which could result in potential negative environmental impacts. But the agency has done no environmental analysis of the protocol it's using to decide when to kill wolves, and it refuses to do that analysis. The Administrative Procedures Act, down to its basics, really just says that an agency's decisions have to be based on a rational, reasoned decision-making process. The evidence shows, and as I just described to you with those few examples, their decision-making has not been rational. It's gone against even their own protocol, and it's been based on politics, not on science or what's good for wolves. The lawsuits are pending before different judges in state court. In one case, the judge declared that the arguments we made about violations of state law were of sufficient public interest that he requires the department to give 8 court hours public notice before it starts any kill operation to allow members of the public time to go to court to seek a restraining order to prevent the killing. In another case, after the department had gunned down the entire OPT pack, the judge issued an injunction which prohibits the department from killing any wolves which may wander into the former OPT pack territory. The thing is, the department's irrational decisions and actions haven't just led to these lawsuits. They've also led to hundreds of thousands of people writing and calling the department's director, writing and calling Governor Inslee and the commission. More than 530,000 people have signed petitions asking Governor Inslee to call off the slaughter. Citizens have also placed billboards at Interstate 5 near Olympia and placed full-page ads in the Seattle Times and the Spokesman Review making the same request of Governor Inslee, asking him to intervene. And then on September 30th, Governor Inslee finally took action, and he sent an official letter to the department stating that the annual killing of wolves for conflicts with livestock in Northeast Washington is simply unacceptable, and directing the department to significantly reduce overall its reliance on killing wolves as a means to resolve conflict. The fact that the governor took this action is huge, and it's due to the relentless pressure by all of you and us and our colleagues and many conservation organizations and hundreds of thousands of people across the country and even around the world who are watching what's happening in Washington, who have all been sending letters and comments and calls to the governor's office. So what he did was huge, but it doesn't mean that it's time to take the pressure off. Many of us wrote to the governor to explicitly thank him for taking action to champion wolves, but we also wrote him to tell him what else needs to be done, which is reform the department, reform the commission that oversees the department, and there needs to be the development of a transparent, accountable, and enforceable set of policies and actions to recover and conserve wolves in Washington, which follow the science, which follow the law, and have full public involvement. Now, just as an important side note, a department overhaul is needed not just because of its flawed wolf management policies, but also due to really extremely troubling management actions for some other wildlife species. At a future date, we're going to bring you up to speed on how the department is allowing the killing of black bears on commercial timberlands, in contravention of two initiatives that citizens passed in 1996 and 2000, which outlawed the killing of black bears using bait, dogs, and traps. So we will be letting you know how you can get involved to help protect Washington's bears. So stay tuned. We're now at our two final topics for this evening, which Sophia is going to cover. And our second to the last topic is plans by the state to develop a new wolf plan for when wolves are state delisted.
So in December 2011, the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission adopted the state wolf plan. Since that time, the commission and the department have taken multiple steps aimed at getting wolves delisted as soon as possible from both the state and federal Endangered Species Act, and to get wolves designated as game mammals so they can eventually be hunted. Some of those steps include, in January 2012, when they implemented the plan and wolf management overall was taken away from the endangered species staff of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and turned over to the department's game management division. 3 months later, in April of the same year, the commission issued an 8-page position statement on wolf management and the state plan. This statement directed the department to begin the process of developing a post-state delisting plan. At the time, Washington had only a confirmed total of 27 wolves in 5 packs with 2 successful breeding pairs. The commission also stressed the need for the state to secure full control over wolf management. In 2013, the department helped craft a wolf-related bill that would have, among other things, designated state endangered wolves as game mammals. Fortunately, intensive pushback by the conservation community and the public got that provision stricken from the bill. Also in 2013, the commission adopted a regulation which greatly expanded the circumstances beyond what was allowed in the wolf plan as to when private citizens could kill a wolf. In 2013, and again this year in 2019, when U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services has proposed stripping wolves of federal Endangered Species Act protections across most of the lower 48 United States, including in Washington, the department sent letters to the federal government supporting this proposal. In 2014, the department attempted to include wolves in its supplemental environmental impact statement to update the state game management plan for 2015 through 2021. Again, it was due to intensive pushback by the conservation community and the public that the department ultimately removed any discussion of wolves in its 6-year plan for managing huntable game animals. On August 1st of this year, the department filed documents initiating the formal process of developing a post-state delisting plan. The department will develop the plan under the process that is required by the State Environmental Policy Act that Amaroq explained to you a few minutes ago. And here is how that goes. First, the department has to make an initial finding of significance. They have already done that, and that's a finding that the development of such a plan could have environmental impacts. Next, the department opens a public comment period called scoping. The scoping process is aimed at gathering initial comments from the public on what the public thinks should go into a post-state delisting wolf plan. That comment period started August 1st and it ends at 5 p.m. November 1st. It's an important date to note, so I hope everybody caught that. 5 p.m. on November 1st. The department has a webpage that explains how to submit comments, and we also have a link set up that you can use to submit comments, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. Once the scoping period has closed, the department will evaluate the comments it has received, and then it will prepare what is called a draft environmental impact statement, or a DEIS for short. That DEIS will contain several different alternatives for the wolf plan, and it will state which one of those is the department's preferred alternative. Once the draft environmental impact statement is done, then another scoping period will be held for the public to read the draft and provide comments on that. including being able to indicate which alternative you prefer, or if you prefer one of the alternatives with modifications you suggest, or if you recommend something entirely different from any of the proposed alternatives. The DEIS will also be reviewed by outside peer reviewers who will hopefully be scientists with expertise in the wolf-related issues covered in the draft. Then there will likely be more changes made by the department with input from the commission, and at some point a final environmental impact statement will come out, which will be the final post-state delisting wolf plan. The department expects this process to take several years. So the department, as part of the scoping process, had planned to hold 14 public meetings throughout the state during September and October. This would have allowed members of the public to hear the department describe this process in person and to ask questions in person. At the last minute, the department decided to cancel the public meetings and to instead hold 3 webinars, which they just completed last week. The department said the public meetings were canceled based on concerns that the wolf issue was so volatile, they feared that the members of the public might disrupt the meetings. They claimed it was a matter of public safety. We think it's highly regrettable that the department took this action to deny the public the chance to interact in person with the department. The department holds Wolf Advisory Group meetings throughout the year where department staff speaks with the Wolf Advisory Group members and answers questions and gets their input. Members of the public are allowed to attend these meetings, but they can't say anything at all until the last half hour of each day. And even that is just a chance to comment. The public doesn't really get to ask questions and have their questions answered. The discussions the department has with the Wolf Advisory Group lead to policy decisions and guidance documents like the Wolf-Livestock Interaction Protocol. They discuss contentious and volatile issues. It is a shame the department backed out of doing the same for the rest of the public. The center decided to host our own webinar because of our concern over the inability for the public to have an in-depth discussion with the department about a post-delisting plan and how the department is currently managing wolves under the current plan. We want to provide the information on the kinds of questions we frequently get about wolf recovery and management in Washington. Our final topic this evening is going to be how to submit scoping comments and what key issues you should comment on. So just to reiterate, that scoping period closes November 1st at 5 p.m. Pacific time. For your comments to be considered by the department, they must be received by 5 p.m. Second, the department has a web page through which you can submit your comments. Third, the Center for Biological Diversity has an online alert page through which you can submit your comments, but we need them from you by noon on November 1st, so we have time to compile them and get them to the department on time. So here's the link to the Center's Washington Wolf Alert webpage where you can submit your comments. And our alert contains a sample letter. However, it is critical that you personalize the sample letter with your own individual comments. So don't just fill out your name and send it as is. Unless you add your own individual comments, your letter is not going to stand out and it will not be taken seriously by the department. In the last few minutes of tonight's webinar, we are going to describe to you several key issues you should comment on to the department. You should add on to the sample letter in your own words your thoughts on these key topics and why they are so important for the department to consider. So just another reminder, if you're going to use our sample letter, please make sure to submit those comments through the center's webpage no later than noon on November 1st, because we need to be able to compile them and meet that 5 p.m. filing deadline that the department has given us. So what are the top line issues you should comment on? Here is a list of our suggestions. It is premature for the department to start writing a post-state delisting plan. First of all, there are no wolves yet in the 3rd recovery region in the state, and annual wolf population growth is stagnating. Numbers of wolves in Washington's packs are smaller than projected, and this all adds up to the fact that Washington is unlikely to meet the plan's recovery goals by 2021, as was anticipated. The department should instead be focused be focusing on the most contentious issue in wolf management in Washington, i.e. how to resolve livestock conflicts with wolves. The department must follow Governor Jay Inslee's directive to significantly reduce the department's killing of wolves to address conflicts. And instead, the department must focus on effective, fully employed, non-lethal measures that are suited for the circumstances and actual requirements that they be used. The department also should put resources into a massive ongoing public education campaign about wolves to help the public understand what wolves are all about and why we need to conserve them and that we can coexist with wolves. Since the department plans to develop a post-state delisting plan, even though it is premature, here are some additional comments you can make on what should be in that plan. The bulk of what is in the existing plan should be retained, but the science needs to be updated. For instance, on the effectiveness of lethal versus non-lethal conflict deterrence, social tolerance for wolves, the ecological role of wolves in ecosystems, the effects of killing wolves on wolf pack social structure and viability, the mechanisms which exist in nature to regulate wolf populations, and ethical considerations in the management of large predators. For addressing livestock conflicts with wolves, the plan must focus on non-lethal measures and kill wolves only as a last resort. Wolves should not be killed on public lands, nor be killed for livestock conflicts on public lands. The department should conduct a full SEPA analysis to develop a protocol for managing livestock wolf conflicts, which focuses on the use of non-lethal deterrent measures, is based on science, and involves full public input through a rulemaking process. And sorry for my use of acronyms there. Just to be clear, SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act that we've been talking about. Another point that you could make is that wolves should not be designated as a huntable game mammal upon state delisting, and there should be no state-sanctioned hunting or trapping seasons on wolves. Wolf population self-regulates through inter-pack strife to protect territories. They are regulated by the availability and density of their prey populations, chiefly elk and deer. Wolves do not need to be managed via hunting or trapping. Furthermore, the plan should update the information on wolf-wild ungulate interactions, especially that wolves are not decimating wild ungulate herds in other states. In the neighboring northern Rocky Mountain states, where the wolf population is magnitudes larger than in Washington, wild ungulate populations are at or above management objectives in most game management units, and hunters are having all-time success in hunting elk and deer, despite the widespread misbelief in the hunting community that wolves are decimating wild game herds. The plan should also note the science on the role wolves could play in Washington to help prevent or curb the incursion of chronic wasting disease in wild ungulates. Lastly, the new wolf plan should reflect that the department holds wolves in trust for all the public, not just for the private, for-profit livestock industry, and not just for people who want to hunt wolves. Now we are going to turn things over to Diane, who is going to act as moderator during our question and answer session.
Thanks, Sophia. All right, so we have covered a lot tonight, and we know that you probably need some time to let it sink in a little, but we're going to open it up for questions now and see if anything immediate has come up. This call is being recorded, and we'll send out a recording tomorrow. Also, if you have questions in the meantime, or if things come up after you catch the recording, feel free to reach out to us. So again, the Q&A button is at the bottom of your screen if you have not been able to submit your questions yet. Okay, let's get started. Someone was asking, can I ask friends to write a comment using this link, and can folks who are out of state comment?
Absolutely, yes. One of the things that we did was we actually asked the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife if they would read and consider comments coming from people outside of the state of Washington, and they said that yes, they will. So you can share that link with other people, and please do so.
And just make sure that your friends who you're sharing that link with also include personalized comments so that it is not just a form letter that's being sent to the department.
And make sure your friend knows to send it by noon, November 1st, so we can include it in all the ones that we're going to send to the department by the end of the day.
Awesome, thanks. All right, someone was wondering, Fish and Wildlife said that they are required to protect leased land on the Colville National Federal Park. How can Washington State override federal land leased by private ranchers in Washington?
So I'm not sure exactly what quote that they've said that you're referring to, but I'll tell you from my own experience, what I've heard them say is that they don't have control over national forest lands and what the policies are on national forest lands. And to what extent they're correct, it's the National Forest Service that administers those lands and that has the grazing leases that livestock operators can apply to get a permit for the privilege of being allowed to lease that land. However, the state agency does have the authority to decide how they will administer their own state policies. So for instance, the agency could make a decision that they're not going to kill wolves on public lands, or they're not going to kill wolves for conflicts that occur on public lands. The agency has its own ability and its own authority to make the decisions about what their own actions will be towards wolves on those lands.
Okay, thank you. Several folks had questions about, y'all were talking about the same livestock operation who's responsible for many of these wolf kills. Folks are wondering if that's public information, who that is, how can people pressure them, and how do we know that information to begin with?
So I'll answer a little bit and then I want to give Sophia a chance to dive in here too. So we know that the operation is the Diamond N operation owned by Len McIrvin, and we know that because he has publicly stated that in interviews he has done with the Capitol Press. So even before we obtained any public documents through Public Records Act requests, which by the way, when we request those, the names of participating livestock operators and participating staff will be redacted. So just for us, the same as with any of you submitting a Public Records Act request, those names are going to be redacted, they'll be blacked out. And that's because the legislature passed a law, I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2017, maybe Sophia remembers, but that prohibits the department from giving out that information. However, in this instance, this particular rancher has self-identified in the media as to who he is and that it's his operation. And as far as, you know, submitting any pressure on him, I'd actually advise you not to do that. This isn't a matter of us against the livestock operators. Now, hopefully, what we've tried to convey in this webinar tonight and what we repeatedly try to convey is who we're trying to hold responsible is the state agency. They're the ones that are managing wolves and other wildlife on behalf of all the public. It is up to them to develop policies that are transparent, accountable, and enforceable, and it is up to them to make requirements of livestock owners, not just expectations. So I would say don't train your pressure at all on the livestock operators. You know, they're operating within what the agency is allowing them to do. We need to hold our agency accountable. And once our agency is accountable, then the rules are in place. Sophia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was great, Amaroq. Even I just learned some things from that one.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, someone was wondering if the state is in violation of its own regulations or in violation of the law, how can pressure be brought on Attorney General Ferguson not to defend the agency's illegal actions?
Okay, I'll take that. So just as we have recommended that people continually call and write the director of WDFW, the commission, the governor. Go ahead and call and write the AG's office. I mean, they are aware how the public feels about this, but I don't think there's a problem with you calling and writing to them. I think that in any agency and in any attorney general's office, there are to be people that are pretty broad-minded and pretty well educated on a whole range of views, as well as the law. And I don't think it would hurt for them to hear from you.
Awesome. All right, so many questions here. Let's see. Someone's wondering about kind of our grassroots stuff on the ground in Washington. Have we held protests, and how are we making sure that the general public knows what's happening to wolves in Washington?
We have held protests. Oh, you're going to jump in? Go for it.
I can take that one. So we've definitely held protests in the past. The most recent one was actually on our the federal delisting side. So it was more focused on that and not as focused on the state wildlife, the state wolf killing issues that are going on. But that's not to say that we have certainly held protests in the past on both of those issues. I guess in terms of upcoming on the ground actions, there's certainly been talk about holding a wolf rally or some kind of legislative wolf day down at the Capitol during the next session. And that starts in January. I would encourage anybody that's not following the center on Facebook or following our organizing department, Mobilize for the Wild, that would be a great place to learn about those events when they do happen. Amaroq, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of other avenues that we constantly use to try to keep the public informed. One is that we constantly issue press releases. And if you've been reading newspaper articles, media articles, anytime there's been a new kill order, anytime there have been wolves killed, we have immediately gotten out a rapid response quote to the reporters in the region and call them and say, look, this is going on. Can we interest you in writing a story about this? And we'd love to talk to you about it more. So we're extremely active in doing that. And you will often see us quoted in newspaper stories, media accounts as a result. We also write op-eds and get those published. Sophia had a great op-ed published in the Spokesman Review earlier this summer. And then, of course, whenever there is some kind of action, whether it's these scoping comments or anytime we're feeling that people really need to just be keeping the pressure on, we issue alerts constantly. So if you're not already signed up to get our alerts, you probably will be after having registered for this webinar. Is that right, Diane? Do they automatically start receiving like our Washington Wolf alerts?
Yes, they should.
Okay. And then also sometimes I give presentations in Washington. I've given multiple presentations at when a book author was doing a book reading on wolves, Wolf Nation, which is a great book by author Brenda Peterson. She invited me up there to give a wolf talk with her. I've given wolf talks in other cities around the state. I've been invited by public libraries and other places to give talks. So we do our best to get around.
Awesome. All right, so we are pretty much at the hour here. I did want to address one final question that several folks brought up, which was, will this information be available somewhere for them to reference afterwards? In addition to the recording, I'm wondering if we should maybe make the presentation something that's downloadable or some version of that, but we can chat more about that. We will follow up in an email tomorrow with more information there. And I know there are many of you who had questions that did not get answered. So you can always reach out to us at mobilize@biologicaldiversity.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can if you send us a message there. Okay, thank you all so much for participating tonight. When we were preparing to launch the National Call of the Wild Wolf campaign almost a year ago, Amaroq spoke so much about how incredible wolf supporters are, and I have honestly been blown away by the support and dedication in this community. So whether you are brand new to the pack tonight or have been fighting for wolves for years, I know you're in good company, and we will not stop until they are safe. So thank you so much again for being on. We'll be in touch, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.